The COVID lockdown affecting 5 million people in Sydney and surrounding areas is expected to be extended today. The lockdown has gone for nearly 3 weeks so far, and the COVID outbreak has continued to grow with more and more new cases in the community while infectious. We're expecting that key announcement from Premier Gladys Berejiklian around 11 this morning. It's in about 2 hours' time. That's Eastern time, so we'll bring you that live here on the ABC News channel. One of the key areas of concern has been Fairfield in Sydney's west. There have been extraordinary scenes overnight and this morning with massive queues for testing. Reporter Alison Xiao joins us now from Fairfield. Alison, g'day. What's happening where you are?
Well, there is an enormous queue here at Fairfield West at this 24-hour testing clinic at Endeavour Sports Park. And these cars are backed up for kilometres upon kilometres in every direction. And there's reports that people have been waiting up to 6 to 8 hours to get a swab. And as you can see, there's only 2 lanes of traffic. So it is a slow-moving queue. And we have spoken to local MPs who say that there's chaos and frustration with many residents frustrated that it's taking so long to get a swab. Some residents say that they weren't even able to get into their homes last night because of the amount of traffic, while others say that they queued up at other testing clinics but were turned away once they got to the entrance because the clinic had actually closed. And we also heard that this is an influx is from that mandatory requirement that came in yesterday that was announced that requires every essential worker who lives in Fairfield to go and get a test every 3 days in order to work. And so this is surveillance testing, meaning they don't have to self-isolate after getting their test. They can go straight back to work. And of course, the state government says that there is no urgency. We spoke to Brad Hazzard, the health minister, earlier, and he said that this rule didn't really kick in until Friday because there was an exemption period for people and for emergency service workers, including police and fire services, that they only require to get a test weekly. We also spoke to a traffic controller here at Endeavour Sports Park. Let's take a listen.
I was waiting at least a couple of hours to get just to get a test right over there. All we can ask is that please just bear with us a bit while we do the best we can, and hopefully we can get the most negative cases as possible with all the cars here. Obviously, after waiting 3 hours to get a test and wait in line, there's going to be a bit of frustration. That's why we just ask that you bear with us a bit. Thank you.
Yeah, one of those frontline workers there dealing with those queues of people. And so, Alison, just explain for us the setup there in Fairfield. There are a couple or more than a couple of testing sites?
Yeah, there are about 6 to 10 testing sites, and they have a range of opening hours. So this is the only 24-hour testing clinic, and we came here yesterday morning when it opened at 8 a.m. and there were only a handful of cars here yesterday, but that was of course before the state government's announcement, and I don't think people were expecting this requirement to go out and get surveillance tested. And they've also introduced that requirement for essential workers who are leaving the Greater Sydney area and going to regional New South Wales, that they will need to get a test every week. And of course, last night we saw huge queues at Fairfield Showgrounds as well, which is one of the main testing clinics in this Fairfield area, and they have a much larger setup. They have almost like a warehouse feel. There's many lanes of traffic. I was there on Sunday and there were only a handful of cars there. There was no waiting time at all. So this is definitely a huge dramatic change from the days prior.
And Alison, as you understand it, is the testing requirement only for essential workers in Fairfield who are leaving the Fairfield area? So it's not for essential workers who are continuing to work just within the Fairfield area, or is it for them as well?
So it's for people who are leaving the LGA.
Yeah.
So if you look on the New South Wales government website, their requirement is if you're leaving the Fairfield LGA as an essential worker, if you're a tradie or you're a nurse and you're leaving, or an aged care worker and you're leaving to go to other parts of metropolitan Sydney, you need to get a test every 3 days. And we spoke to a tradie who was going to Wollongong, and he said that he was frustrated about having to go and get a test twice a week now.
And I'll just also mention, you've mentioned this as well, that there's that requirement for people in that Greater Sydney area to get a weekly test if they're leaving that Greater Sydney area. And Alison, just extraordinary to see in those lists that the New South Wales Health Department issues overnight of the new exposure sites, of the continued sites popping up in that Western Sydney area. Although there's a couple popping up north of the Great Western Highway now in places like Blacktown. But in Smithfield, I think next to Fairfield there, one place where there was a worker, it looks like there was a worker infectious for the whole week, but basically the whole week last week.
Yeah, there's also places including Condell Park. The IGA there is a venue of concern for last Monday around 9 a.m. and Adenza Park as well for Fred's one-stop shop last Friday between 2 to 3 p.m. So there's new venues popping up every day, multiple times a day. There's public transport routes, which are also venues of concern. Now, this doesn't mean that transmission has occurred at these venues, but these are essentially places that people with COVID-19 who have been infectious for some or part or all of their infectious period have been out and about in the community, either going to their essential shopping or doing essential tasks. And so yesterday we heard that there were 89 new cases and up to 34 of them were infectious in the community for some or all of their period. And of course, we understand that 64 of those 89 cases, so the vast majority, are from the southwestern Sydney area. So there's definitely huge concern about this area in particular.
Yeah. And Alison, obviously with those people going in to get tested there, most of them are in their cars with their windows up so you don't get to chat to them, and you as a reporter you've got to be careful as well. But what's the sense you're getting out there, that the mood among people with these case numbers continuing to grow and Fairfield being this particular area of concern?
We have spoken to a number of people in Fairfield over the last few days, and I can see on the streets that the number of people out and about has dramatically reduced. So on the weekend there were people out and about when the police first started ramping up their presence, and now the police are a common sight on the streets of Fairfield, and they're definitely policing the area. But people are definitely very concerned about what is happening with this spread. Although yesterday's cases was a decline on the previous day's 112 cases, the Premier says that one day does not make up a trend, and she still expects these case numbers to bounce around. So residents are clearly turning up in droves to go and get tested. They're concerned. They know that this is surveillance testing. There's probably more people here than just essential workers. They probably want to be safer than sorry, so they're coming and getting their test.
Okay, Alison Xiao reporting there from Sydney. And obviously we're focusing a lot over the last couple of days on that Fairfield area, which is just to the south of Parramatta in Sydney, because there have been so many positive cases there. But there continue to be cases popping up over heaps of different parts of Sydney. Sutherland in the south has been mentioned repeatedly in the last couple of days. And I mentioned there in that chat to Alison that we're starting to see a fair few exposure sites pop up north of the Great Western Highway now as well. It hasn't really moved much into that area just yet. And so health officials are saying, while there is this focus on Fairfield, everyone in that greater Sydney area, those 5 million people, that area that extends north past Gosford, west past Katoomba and south past Wollongong, everyone has to be extremely careful about wearing their masks, staying their distance from people, and keeping a watch out for what's happening with the exposure sites as they pop up over the coming days. So that key announcement from Gladys Berejiklian due at 11 this morning, that's Eastern time. We'll bring that live here on the ABC News channel. The expectation is we're hearing that Gladys Berejiklian is going to be announcing today an extension to that lockdown, the 3-week lockdown, which this initial period was due to wrap up on Friday night. Now let's head south to Victoria. It's recorded one new local COVID case as health authorities try to get more information about where a group of removalists visited while in the state. Reporter Steph Ferrier joins us now from Melbourne. Steph, g'day. So take us through the figures.
Good morning, Joe. Yes, so this one new local case is a known primary close contact who was already in isolation during their infectious period. So that is good news. Now, this possibly could be the last family member of that family of 4 that was isolating in the city of Hume in Melbourne's north after they had come back from the red zone in New South Wales and were isolating during their isolation period. However, one of those people did go off to Coles Craigieburn and also to a service station in Broadmeadows, also in Melbourne's north. But we do know that it was a family of 4, so there was the father, the mother and a child that have already been infected, and we already heard that it was very likely that that 4th member of the family would probably test positive in the coming days. However, there are also other close primary contacts as well that are in the Ariel service departments as well, including a tenant. So obviously they might not have been isolating during their infectious period. So it tends to indicate that it is this family of 4, but we still have to hear that information. We've put those requests into the health department, but they haven't got back to us at this stage. So this is just one new case, which is at least good news, and we had one case overseas from a returned international traveller. That's off the back of some 33,037 test results received, which is a pretty strong testing number as well. And it now means that we have 19 cases in the state that are active. Yesterday there were 20, so that's down by 1, and yesterday we heard that 5 of those were local, so that number is obviously would have ticked up, and 15 overseas acquired.
And Steph, there's this concern about these removalists and where they were at. And you were at that apartment block yesterday. We're having a chat to you there. Have there been any cases yet of positive cases popping up as a result of where those removalists were?
We haven't seen any cases. Of course, we're still to clarify what this one new local case is. And the only one that I can think of is the tenant or owner that Jerome Weimar, the state's testing COVID commander, was talking about, who said that that person, he was the one who had the most exposure to these removalists. However, they were still moving through the foyer and the lifts and the stairwells without masks on, according to the residents that live there. So there is that possibility as well. However, what we did hear from Jerome Weimar was that that tenant or owner had not tested positive. They'd returned a negative result yesterday, and that they hadn't had any positives. But he did say that it was a really important time over the next couple of days to look at up to these 200 residents that are in there, and just to see whether or not that's the 78 apartments, and they're now in day 2 of their lockdown, of course, to see whether or not we do see any spread. But what the health department did say was that they were really concerned about the fact that they weren't getting fulsome and accurate information about the movements from these removalists. So they were really quite annoyed about that, and did actually say that they were, going to potentially throw the book at them afterwards as well for not following national freight coronavirus guidelines. But what we have seen is 2 new exposure sites that have been listed. Now, it's been confirmed that these are linked to the removalists, and the first one is the Caltex mobile service station at Calcalo in Melbourne's north, and that is where it's understood that this gang of 3, according to Jerome Weimar, the 3 removalists, 2 of whom have already tested positive, stopped to get fuel. They had a toilet stop and also went to the local Hungry Jack's as well, before going down to Craigieburn in Melbourne's north, dropping off some furniture and then heading on to those Ariel apartments in Maribyrnong in Melbourne's northwest. And we have already heard as well that, of course, they went after that to Balan, which is on the way to Ballarat, because they were tracking across to South Australia. They stopped at a service station and also at the McDonald's there on that Thursday evening. So they've already identified some 55 customers there at those 2 sites that will also need to go into isolation as well. And of course, it's any guess exactly how many people might have gone to this Calcalo new site, and whether or not, obviously any of those people are going to have to go and get tested immediately and also isolate for 14 days, because that's also been classified as a tier 1 or top level high-risk tier exposure site here.
And Steph, you mentioned the tenant that the removalists were delivering to has not tested positive. How many days is it since he had contact with removalists?
Yeah, so this is almost a week now, because we are, so that was Thursday the 8th of July that they came down.
Yeah.
There was that family of 5 in Craigieburn, and then also a family of 4 that is in isolation, including the owner who had the most exposure to them in Maribyrnong as well. So at this stage, it's still no sign of positive, which is a really great sign.
Yeah.
So we'll obviously have to wait and see what further information we get from the health department when they come up at some stage today. We still don't have a time yet.
And so how confident does it seem the Victorian Health Department is that this is under control?
Yes, well, we did hear from the state's Deputy Chief Health Officer. Sorry, they have just recently changed over roles. So that's Professor Dan O'Brien, and he said that, you know, the decisions about further easing restrictions could be tempered by this new outbreak, and he really wants to see what the situation is in 5 to 7 days before he feels comfortable that they've really got absolutely on top of things. And obviously that is going to pertain to exactly how many cases might come out, not only of the exposure sites that relate to the removalists, but also to this family of four when they went to presumably relatively busy shopping centre in Coles, and also to that Broadmeadows service station. They've been able to identify some 54 primary close contacts from those sites using QR codes. They're also looking at CCTV and trying to work out things at Balan as well, so that they can really get on top of things. But he does say that he will be feeling a lot more confident after that time, and that is the sort of time frame that they're looking at to just check to see whether or not any further positive cases come up. But, in the meantime, it's going to be a very long 2 weeks for all of those people at the service departments that are now just in day 2, as I mentioned.
Okay, Steph Ferry there. And Steph, what time can we expect a media conference with the Victorian officials today?
We still don't have a time for the health department. There's been a couple of notifications that have come in through for various ministers, but none of them pertain to health or the Premier.
Okay, Steph Ferry reporting there from Melbourne. The Prime Minister has dismissed accusations that New South Wales is receiving preferential treatment over Victoria when it comes to Commonwealth support. It comes after the federal and New South Wales governments announced a multi-billion-dollar package for businesses and workers affected by the Greater Sydney lockdown. Political reporter Jane Norman joins us now from Parliament House in Canberra. Jane, g'day. So just run us through the details of this package first.
Yeah, well, it's a multi-billion-dollar lifeline, Joe, announced yesterday, a jointly funded package between the New South Wales and Commonwealth governments, and it'll kick in from next week, so week 4 of Sydney's lockdown, and this will be used as a template for any future protracted lockdowns. So let's start with the individuals first. The COVID relief payment is being increased to $600 a week for workers who've lost more than 20 hours. For those working fewer than 20 hours, the payment has increased to $375 a week. Then for small and medium businesses who can prove a 30% reduction in turnover, they'll be eligible for payments of between $1,500 and $10,000 a week in what's being described as a cash flow boost, really to help them pay their wages, their workers' wages. And the condition attached to that support is that the businesses must retain their staff. Here is how the Treasurer Josh Frydenberg has explained this latest support package.
What we've sought to do, Michael, with these payments is to provide cash flow assistance to businesses because they incur fixed costs, whether it's utilities costs or rent, even though customers are not coming through the door, and also individual household, family worker assistance with a elevated payment at up to $600 a week or $375 a week, depending on the number of hours that have been lost due to the lockdown.
And Jane, so this was announced yesterday. What's the reaction been to it?
Yeah, well, business groups have largely welcomed this. Labor has described it as too little too late, given that it's kicking in week 4 of a protracted lockdown, and a lockdown that at this stage, Joe, has no end in sight. But it's the Victorian government that has reacted perhaps most strongly to this. You might remember about 6 weeks ago when Melbourne was going through its 2-week lockdown, the Commonwealth appeared to drag its feet in terms of offering more federal support. It eventually did introduce this COVID relief payment, but only after days of public pleas from the Victorian government. So yesterday, after this announcement, the Premier there, Dan Andrews, issued a statement saying while he welcomes the fact Sydney is getting the support it needs, he says that his state had to shame the Commonwealth into taking action, and Victorians, he said, are sick and tired of having to beg for every scrap of federal support. Well, that has sparked a bit of a tit-for-tat with the Federal Treasurer Josh Frydenberg, who's described Victoria's reaction as childish and petulant, and he says voters are sick of the whinging. Well, the Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, isn't buying into that, but he has made it clear this morning that Victoria and Sydney received exactly the same support for the first 2 weeks of their lockdowns. This is now a new scenario we're finding ourselves in, and the same support that will be offered from next week for Sydney would be offered to other states in similar circumstances.
What has happened in New South Wales is exactly what happened in Victoria. It was the same support provided by the Commonwealth to New South Wales and Victoria during that 2-week period. We're now going into a longer lockdown. When Victoria needed the rest of the country last year, when they were in that very long lockdown on the second wave, the Commonwealth was putting in $750 million into Victoria every week. $13.4 billion of direct support to employers and employees in Victoria over the many months. In Victoria, there was more JobKeeper provided to Victoria than any other state during that time. So when Victoria needed Australia, they got the support.
Well, the Labor leader Anthony Albanese has accused the federal government of stoking tensions with the Victorian Labor government, which he says is ultimately unhelpful.
We need, as a national government, to support people wherever they live, whether it's New South Wales or Victoria. And I think the federal government, and in particular the federal treasurer, who's from Victoria, I think some of his comments over a period of many months now are what has caused this tension.
Tonight's State of Origin Game 3 will be played on the Gold Coast for the first time, with the match being moved out of New South Wales at the 11th hour due to the COVID risk. Reporter Michael Rennie joins us now from Brisbane. So, Michael, is it going to be a clean sweep for the Blues in Queensland?
Oh, we sure hope it isn't going to be that, don't we, Joe? But I think Queensland have every chance of bouncing back in this game. If you look at the team, it's much better than the team they picked last time. You got Kalen Ponga back, you got AJ Brimson, Tabuai Hamarsai-Fidow, who's a very quick player from the Cowboys, so he's on debut. It looks pretty good, and ticket sales have been pretty good so far as well. Tickets only went on sale yesterday, and they've sold over 20,000 tickets so far. I jumped online before, and to get two adults tickets, it was over $465. So that's a good indication that this game will be, yes, 2 tickets. So it's going to be a sellout, I'd say, 27,000 people.
And so, yeah, Gold Coast only had a couple of days to prepare for this.
Yeah, that's right. They've really just only found out on Sunday that they would be hosting this game. But, the stadium would have been ready for NRL matches anyway. And we know that we've got 12 NRL teams coming into Queensland that will be based here for at least a month. So the stadium would have been ready for this. We've seen people going in there all morning already. We've already seen the roadblocks and the heavy security presence here already this morning. So they're certainly going to be prepared for this game.
And Queensland's border with New South Wales remains open for everywhere apart from that Greater Sydney area, but that could change pretty quickly.
Yeah, absolutely, it could. And the Premier, Anastasia Palaszczuk, she's threatening that the border could close at any moment. And there's going to be a heavy police presence on the Gold Coast today. We know that 70 additional officers will be out and about. They're going to be patrolling the roads. They're also going to be patrolling the waterways to ensure that no one comes in to Queensland across the border from any of those hotspots. And that's the message. If you are from any of those hotspots, you are not to come into Queensland, obviously, and then there'll be a fine, the potential of going into hotel quarantine. But I just think overall, having this game here on the Gold Coast is a great reward for the Gold Coast area, which has produced so many great rugby league players, and I'm predicting a Queensland win tonight.
As you would do. Michael Rennie reporting there from Brisbane. Love your optimism.